Hi, folks, and welcome to the lecture on social exchange theory. Before we dive into this theoretical perspective, I just want to zoom out and point out that this is a theory that looks at adult romantic relationships. And typically in relational research, regardless of what theory is being applied or used, there are generally two major outcomes that relational research is interested in, and that is satisfaction and stability. Across all of the different studies and all of the different theories, these are the two kind of guiding outcomes, the so what that people are most interested in answering and asking questions about. And so in this case, satisfaction and stability really are pretty straightforward outcomes, and they should make sense. This is why we're studying adult romantic relationships. One, we want to know, how happy are you with your relationship? And two, stability. This means technically, are you still together? So if we're looking at marriages, it's, are you legally married or not? If we're looking at something that's less clearly defined, dating relationships, long-term cohabitating relationships, it's, have you broken up or not? So stability is pretty categorical. It's a yes or no. But we know that relationships that have a lot of stability, some couples make it truly till death do us part, but along the way, they're not experiencing a whole lot of enjoyment or fulfillment from that relationship. They might be technically together, but they could be together and quite unhappily so. And that is why we differentiate between stability and satisfaction. We want to know what is different about couples that last, but also what is different about couples that feel a lot of happiness and joy from their relationships, satisfaction and stability. Okay, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of this theoretical lens. Now, social exchange theory is based on the premise that successful relationships entail the mutual exchange of desirable rewards with others. And this process of giving and receiving these desirable rewards is called social exchange. We are exchanging rewards with our relational partners. Social exchange theory is actually an umbrella term that covers several different models and theories that are all related to that idea of exchanging desirable rewards with your relational partner. There's a big focus, of course, on romantic relationships. And generally speaking, there are three major theoretical perspectives that fall under social exchange. Those are interdependence theory, the investment model, and equity theory. We are going to explore the first two together, interdependence theory and the investment model. And both of these fall under this umbrella term of social exchange. Social exchange theory and attachment theory are generally considered the two major tentpole theories of adult romantic relationships. Social exchange theory is actually a whole umbrella term that several different theories and models live under. Generally speaking, there are three major social exchange perspectives. Those are one, interdependence theory, two, the investment model, and three, equity theory. Together today, we're going to explore interdependence theory and the investment model. So let's begin with interdependence theory by Thibault and Kelly, published in 1959. This theoretical perspective has enjoyed a lot of attention. A lot of research has been conducted using this theoretical perspective. It's the sort of the biggie of all of the social exchange theories. And it really takes a very different stance on adult romantic relationships. It's a very economic view. So the major premises of interdependence theory says that we are trying to get the best profit out of our relationships. We are seeking maximum rewards, and we want to also minimize the costs. Some people go all in on this theory, really love it, feel that it really reflects reality and boots on the ground, while others don't. So I encourage you, be a critical consumer of this information. You can take a personal stance on it. But I think even if you don't necessarily love this economic view of relationships, it really puts attachment as a different perspective in stark contrast. And it's a very useful tool for thinking about how theory might shape research and what kind of questions we ask and how we answer them. Interdependence theory has a few key concepts, and those include rewards, costs, outcomes, comparison levels, often abbreviated by CL, comparison level of alternatives, CL alt. So let's break down each one. Rewards are results of an interaction that are gratifying, welcome, and fulfilling. So these are the good things that you are exchanging with your relational partner. Rewards can be different for everyone. You and your partner define what counts as a reward within your relationship. What do you find beneficial, pleasant? What do you find is an advantage of being in a relationship? This could be resources that you get from them that are tangible or intangible, like time and attention. This could be warmth and affection. It really is very subjective what counts as a reward. Costs are things that you would define as frustrating, distressing, or undesirable, the negatives to being in that relationship, the disadvantages to being with this particular partner or in a relationship at all. All relationships have costs, all of them, even the very happy ones, the very successful ones. There is something that you must sacrifice in order to be in that relationship, even if it's just autonomy and independence. When you're in a relationship with someone else, you have to take them into consideration. You make decisions that might help them achieve their goals and that might hinder your own. Even something as small as you prefer pepperoni pizza, but they love Hawaiian. So you might find that you're getting pineapple on your pizza. That technically would be a cost. It's not your favorite thing. And if you weren't with that person, you wouldn't have to do it. But there are bigger costs. Perhaps they work too much. They have parents that become your in-laws that drive you nuts, or certain annoying habits. So really, costs are going to be extremely subjective as well. Now think about how this might vary from relationship to relationship. Let's take that autonomy example. For one person, a partner that gives them a lot of space and a lot of independence would be extremely rewarding. But for another person, they would consider that a cost, right? So I might say, I like my freedom, I like my independence, I appreciate the autonomy. That's a real major reward that my partner allows me to continue to have that. Whereas someone else will say, well, no, I want frequent check-ins, I want those text messages, in the morning and night and throughout the day. I want someone that's very close, that is doing all of my activities with me. And so for them, someone that gave them a lot of space and distance would be costly. They wouldn't like that. So these are very self-defined, and you can see why partner agreement on what counts as a reward or a cost might be very important. interdependence theory takes this economic view of relationships. So it looks at these first two components of rewards and costs and basically puts it into a calculation. Put all the rewards in one pile, all the costs in another, and ultimately you want the rewards pile to be bigger. And in fact, you'll subtract the total costs from the total rewards, and this gives you the relationship outcomes. Think of that as the profit, so to speak. We want there to be more in the rewards pile than the cost pile so that there is a positive outcome, so that we are in the black, that we are not in the red and in negative areas. But it is important to note that even if you have a positive outcome, you have more rewards than you have costs, that doesn't mean that you're going to feel happy with the outcome. That pile of leftover rewards, that net profit of the outcome, needs to cross a certain threshold in order for us to feel happy. So outcomes does not equal satisfaction. And that brings us to the next important component. It suggests that we evaluate the outcome of the relationship with two criteria. And this is what explains our satisfaction, these criteria. So rewards minus costs equals outcomes. And then we figure out if that outcome is satisfying or not, dependent on what we expect from our relationships and how well we think we could do with a different partner in another relationship. So let's say you are getting slightly more rewards than costs. For one person, they will be thrilled. But for another person, they might be like, I'm only getting this much reward? Meh. So this is a subjective experience as well. It's very much about the individual's perceptions. What we expect from relationships is understood as this next important component, our comparison level, or CL. This is where satisfaction comes in, because our comparison level is what we expect from relationships generally, what we feel we deserve in our dealings with others. And we are going to apply that comparison level, that general, this is what I think I deserve in relationships, this is how I think relationships should reward me, to our particular relationship. So what am I getting with this partner? It basically means, what is the minimum that I would be happy with? What do I think I should be getting out of my romantic relationship? When our outcomes exceed our comparison level, we feel happy and content because we're getting more than the minimum, right? Like if our comparison level is the bar that must be cleared, if the current relationship that we're in gives us more rewards than our general comparison level, we feel good. But when our outcomes are lower than our comparison level, we are not satisfied. We feel we could and should do better. Even if there's not a particular another person or relational partner we have in mind, our comparison level is, I think relationships should always include support, companionship, physical affection, perhaps geographic proximity. I want to actually see my partner. And this partner is a wonderful person trying their best, but, they live in California. And that is just too costly. Our comparison level, or what we believe we generally deserve, could be based on previous experiences, family of origin modeling. Certainly, if someone has had a string of bad relationships in a row, you might have a very low comparison level. and just want to break even going into the next situation. But if you've had a lot of wonderful, amazing, loving, supportive relationships, you might have a very high comparison level and expect and desire a lot of rewards and very high outcomes in order to feel that the minimum has been met, that threshold has been cleared. Comparison level is therefore the standard with which satisfaction is assessed because we know that our outcomes are our rewards minus our costs. Now we have another equation in interdependence theory, which are our outcomes minus our comparison level. And that is going to tell us how happy or unhappy, how satisfied or dissatisfied we are. Which is to say, even if a relationship is profitable and rewarding, the outcomes is positive, you still might not be satisfied if the outcome, the profit, isn't big enough to meet your expectations, your comparison level. And here is another important consideration for satisfaction. How well could we do elsewhere? So not just what do we expect from our relationships and is this particular relationship living up to that, but also what other fish are in the sea. So whether or not we're happy, we also evaluate our partnerships with a comparison level for alternatives, or CL alt, that describes the outcome we believe, we think we could get elsewhere, aka with another romantic partner. So let's go back to that last equation. Outcomes minus comparison level equals satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Let's say that I'm in a relationship now. I have my outcomes from this relationship. It's very rewarding. The rewards are much greater than the costs, which gives me positive outcomes, and that more than exceeds my comparison level. I'm doing better than the bare minimum. I'm doing very well. I'm very happy in the relationship. I still am going to consider, if I were to break up with this partner and be with someone else, could I do even better? Right? So even, and this is where interdependence theory is sometimes criticized as being very cold-blooded and calculated, because it says even happy couples, even someone that is very happy with their partner, who has a romantic partner who's very good to them and makes them feel all the good feelings that they want, they still are going to be scanning their environment for comparison levels for alternatives. What alternative partners are available, and could any of them give them even more rewards? What else could I get? And that includes with another romantic partner, or if you were alone, if you became single. Because remember, if you're single, you're not having the costs of that relationship. So, would I be better off? According to interdependence theory, if we think we could do better, either single or in another relationship, all things considered, it predicts that we are likely to leave our present partners and pursue those bigger payoffs, even if we're currently happy with what we've got. And I should point out that if we think we can do better, that might be with another specific partner that we know. That might be just general, hypothetical someone else. And it's also very much in the eye of the beholder. So it's from that person's point of view. They might see another dating partner that could give them more rewards, and that person might not have any interest in that. It might not be reciprocated, but if the individual doesn't see that, isn't aware of that, they still would consider that an option. And interdependence theory says that they'd be very likely to break up with their current partner. On the other hand, interdependence theory says that even if we're in a relationship that isn't making us very satisfied, the costs are high, it's barely meeting our comparison level, or it's not meeting our comparison level, we still won't break up with that partner. We won't leave unless a better alternative presents itself. So Thibault and Kelly suggest several of these formulas, a couple of these that we've seen. Outcomes equals rewards minus costs, and satisfaction is outcomes minus comparison level. And that our dependence on that relationship, our likelihood of staying in it, equals our outcomes minus our comparison level for alternatives. So it's very mathematical in how Thibault and Kelly talk about their theory. And it brings up this idea of dependence on the relationship. Dependence is outcomes minus comparison level for alternatives. If no one could give you at least the same or better outcomes, the more you depend on that relationship. So if being alone or being with someone else could give you equal or better outcomes, you are less dependent on that relationship. And Thibault and Kelly say that dependence is what's going to predict staying together or not. So let's consider those relational outcomes of satisfaction and stability. With those two outcomes, that gives us 4 different types of relationships: happy and stable, happy and unstable, unhappy and stable, unhappy and unstable. So let's look at these examples. In this first one, the CL, the comparison level we see in the yellow, is at the bottom. And the comparison level for alternatives is a little higher than that. It's above it. And the outcomes are way up there at the top. So the question here is, are you happy? Well, yes, because your outcomes exceed your expectations. The outcomes are way above your CL. So you're getting more from that relationship than you would expect to get or believe you deserve to get. The next question is, are you stable? And here, again, the answer is yes. Your other options, or your comparison level for alternatives, can't give you as good outcomes as you currently have, right? The CL alt is lower than your current outcomes. So you are happy and stable here. According to Thibault and Kelly, they would say that you feel good and you're very unlikely to leave your current partner. And in fact, in this example, the CL and the CL alt could even be flipped, and you'd still be happy and stable because your outcomes are still better than your comparison level, and your outcomes are still better than anyone else, comparison level for alternative. In the second example, are you happy in this relationship? No, because your outcomes are less than your comparison level. So you're getting less than what you believe you deserve. Are you stable? Well, yes, because there is no better other option. Your comparison level for alternatives is even lower than your current outcomes. So you're not that thrilled about this relationship, but Thibault and Kelly would say that you're unlikely to break up with this person because you can't do better elsewhere. Let's look at this third example. Here we see the arrangement of the comparison level alternatives are way up high, above our outcomes, and above our comparison level. And so here, this person would be happy but not stable. Why are they happy? That is my baby in the background, if you can hear that. This person would feel happy because the comparison level is still being exceeded with the outcomes. Your outcomes are better than your expectations. So you feel happy. However, this is one of those grass is greener situations because it appears to this individual that their comparison level of alternatives, that somebody else could give them much higher outcomes than they're currently enjoying. So Thibault and Kelly would say, hey, yes, buddy, yes. That this person feels good about the current relationship. They're their outcomes are good, but they believe they could do even better. So they're likely to break up with their partner. In this fourth example, we see comparison level at the top, comparison level of alternatives slightly below it, outcomes way down low. Here, our comparison level for alternatives and our current situation, our outcomes, are way below our comparison level, which means that our current relationship is not meeting the minimum threshold of what we believe we deserve. So we are not happy with what we currently have going on. But also, it looks like nobody else could meet our needs either. The comparison level for alternatives is still below our comparison level. So we're not happy in this relationship, and it doesn't look great that someone else could meet our needs, but they could do better than we're currently doing, right? Our comparison level for alternatives is still above the outcome of what we're currently experiencing. So even though that doesn't look super satisfying, it's still better than we're doing now. And so Thibault and Kelly would say, this individual is unhappy and likely to leave their current partner. So that's interdependence theory. Now we're going to build on those major components with the investment model. The investment model addresses some of the criticisms of interdependence theory. So it incorporates all of the exact same components, but it's adding a few things, because one of the criticisms of interdependence theory is that yeah, maybe your comparison level for alternatives might seem better, but you still might be stable and unlikely to leave your current relationship because you might not jump ship out of a sense of liking or loyalty to the current partner. You know, you might feel affectionate about them, not want to hurt them. So even if someone else comes along that seems like they could give you more rewards, you might stick it out and stay in your relationship. We certainly see that in real life. And so the investment model is an example of theoretical development because it builds on interdependence theory and adds a few components that try to improve on the theory and make it more true to life. So the investment model says that there are several factors that increase commitment, that it's not just about stability and satisfaction, but there's some other levels that are going to influence how stable. So the investment model, you can see, clearly builds on the interdependence theory. It's still taking a look at costs and rewards that give you your outcomes, and your outcomes minus your comparison level, what you believe you deserve, is how happy you're feeling in that relationship, satisfaction, number one. Number two, you're still going to look at your alternatives, your CL alt, but it adds investment and commitment. So investment can be a lot of things: emotional attachment, how much time you've put into this relationship, how much energy you've devoted, a shared history together, certainly resources you would lose if you left that relationship, like, you know, if you signed a lease together, bought a house together, adopted a dog together, if you have, you know, if you have children together, if you have combined your social circles and friend groups and you've become close with their siblings, you would lose that if you left the relationship. The more investment you have, the more commitment you have. And so the investment model is called that because it adds this very important component, that it's not just about are you happy right now and could you do better? It's also how much have you sunk into this relationship? And the more that you have in tangible and intangible ways, the more commitment you will feel. So it takes satisfaction and alternatives and investments into account to determine stability or commitment. A model is a visual representation of a process. That's why this is called the investment model. It is part of social exchange theory because it maps out what this process looks like of staying together or not staying together in a relationship. And so you can see the flow that it considers your satisfaction, your alternatives, and your investments, and that this is what determines how committed you are to that relationship, and that in turn determines whether you're likely to stay together or break up. Stability. Thus, the investment model suggests that people remain with their partners when, one, they're happy, satisfaction; two, there's no better place to go, alternatives; and three, it would be too costly to leave. That is the new edition of this model. Another contribution or addition of the investment model towards social exchange theory, extending it beyond interdependence theory, is that it not only says that commitment is what predicts stability, but also it breaks out types of commitment. So these three types of commitment feel different, and there may be value in distinguishing them from one another. And so they are personal, constraint, and moral commitment. Personal commitment is the commitment you have because you want to stay in the relationship because it is satisfying. This is where you as an individual are thinking about all of the rewards that this particular partner gives you. Perhaps that, their sense of humor makes you laugh. You like the way that they hug you. They cook a really mean spaghetti bolognese, whatever you consider rewarding that is particular to this person, that makes you feel like not only that you're getting a good deal, but that you're motivated and you want to continue this relationship because it is satisfying. On the other hand, constraint commitment is where the individual feels they have to continue the relationship because it would cost too much to leave. Now, this might mean cost too much in tangible resources, like the kind of divorce cliche, oh, it's cheaper to keep her, staying together because the divorce settlement would be too expensive. So yeah, you can be talking about costs in that way. You'd have to move out, pay your own rent or your own mortgage, lose anything that you had together, perhaps pay alimony and childcare. It's going to depend on the relationship, what the costs are that are tangible. But there's also the intangible costs. Your social circle might suffer. You'd have to go back on the dating market. A lot of people say, oh, thank God I'm not dating today. It looks so challenging. And that is something that people would consider as a part of constraint commitment. Maybe your parents love this partner and they'd be so disappointed if you broke up. If you're married and have children, you might be very concerned about your children's impression of you, or the suffering that they would go through if the relationship would end. These are all very real forms of constraint commitment. And lastly, there is moral commitment. This is the motivation to stay in the relationship because you believe it is the right thing to do. Now, moral commitment is obviously highly related to religiosity. People who are very, very, very religious tend to feel a lot of moral commitment to their relationships. If you believe that your marriage is an oath and a vow that you made to God and it is your earthly duty to see that relationship through, that is a very powerful moral commitment. Part of constraint commitment too is people who feel really high moral commitment that divorce is just wrong no matter what. They tend to also be highly correlated with religiosity, and we know that in those very orthodox religious communities, there is a very large social punishment, constraint commitment for people that do leave their spouse. So they might be shunned, by the community. They might lose the support of their family. And those are constraint commitments, but they're very related to, they co-occur with high moral commitment. So we're going to end this lecture actually with some good news. A lot of relationship theories can be a little dark, and certainly social exchange theory has been criticized for being very cold and calculating and economic. But I think that this is a really light side spin. I think this is a great component of the investment model. It says that commitment has certain consequences. That if a person experiences high commitment, whether it be personal, constraint, moral, and of course those are not mutually exclusive. You might be experiencing a lot of all of those types of commitment. That the more commitment, the more we see a sense of partners taking actions to protect and maintain their relationship. And ultimately, these end up being protective of the relationship. So we see people with high commitment do more accommodative behavior. This is temporarily tolerating provocation without fighting back. So if your partner is in a bad mood and they're trying to pick a fight with you, this is not taking the bait. This is allowing them to, be in their bad mood and not matching it and not escalating the situation, just maintaining that positive emotional state. Also, willingness to sacrifice for your partner. This is putting the well-being of the relationship ahead of your own self-interest. And that might mean putting the individual goals of your partner before your own. So saying, you have this great job opportunity. It is your dream. You've worked so hard for this. I love my job, but I think we should go for it. You should take it. We have to move for your job, and I'm going to go with you and be happy to do that. Like, that's a form of willingness to sacrifice, giving up something that you enjoy or that you would want to give them something that they want in order to maintain a happy relationship. Or to say, I'm going to put this relationship above my personal needs. We have a family. I need to consider what's best for the kids, and that means leaving our city home that I love so much, that's urban and bustling, but finding a suburban location with a better school system. Willingness to sacrifice can look like a lot of different things, but it's putting the well-being of the relationship ahead of your own self-interest. And lastly, and this is a really interesting communication variable, is this idea of perceived superiority. And this is considering your own relationship to be better than other people's relationships, especially your immediate social circle. So perceived superiority, the more committed you are to your relationship, the more you are likely to look around you and say, well, I have it pretty good. And we certainly have it better than Bob and Jen next door, or, my sister and my brother-in-law, they're bickering all the time. Perceived superiority is, it doesn't have to be rooted in reality at all. Perhaps your relationship is not better than other people's. It might be worse. But the point is that you see it that way. And people who perceive superiority in their relationship, that, we're happier, we have a better sex life, we have more peace in the household, we laugh together more, whether that's true or untrue, the perception of that gives people an enormous sense of satisfaction. And we know that satisfaction increases commitment, and commitment increases perceived superiority. So it creates this positive cycle, where, the more you perceive superiority, the better you feel about your relationship, the happier you are, the more you perceive superiority. And, and that's a wonderful thing. And even if it's not true, people who are very committed tend to feel happier because they believe that they're doing better than the immediate others around them. So even though social exchange theory kind of paints people out to be basically greedy at heart and looking for the best deal and calculating their market value and figuring out, are they getting a good deal in a partner, and are they meeting their minimum thresholds, and could they do better elsewhere? Should they trade in the old model for a new one? the investment model says that we are often unselfish, we are often considerate, and we are often caring to those we befriend and love because of our commitment to them. That our commitment makes us more likely to be, good, loving partners to each other. So that is a bit that is a more touchy-feely aspect of social exchange, and I find it to be an interesting and kind of nuanced addition to what is otherwise a pretty economic view of how people make decisions to stay or go in relationships. So I'm going to invite you now to head over to the discussion board, or I'm going to ask you to take a stand, what your opinion is on this theory. And also, you can check out some social exchange examples from from the Disney pantheon. That is, look for these components in those examples. And keep me posted as you develop your social exchange application project. Let me know if you have any questions.